All right, we'll call the meeting to order. Commissioners, as you will recall, members of the Leadership Development Program have joined us to observe the board meeting process, and I'd like to welcome this month's participants. We're happy to have you, and I'd like each of you to stand and introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Anna Haggerty. I work in the Rates and Analytical Services Department, and I've been here for about 5 years.
I'm Dan Riddle. I work in system operations, and I've been here for 6 years.
I'm Sam Thomas, work in electrical engineering. I've been here almost 5 years.
Hello, I'm Luke Jackson. I work in the corporate network and cybersecurity department, specifically cybersecurity. And May this year will be 8 years for me at KUB.
Hello, my name is Brooke Highslope. I work in water systems engineering, and I've been at KUB for 5 years.
Hello, my name is Eric Rhino. I'm in fiber construction. I've been here a little over 7 years.
Well, thank you. We appreciate your leadership at the company. Mr. Coley, will you please call the roll?
Commissioner Caballero. Commissioner Feinbaum.
Aye.
Commissioner Gibson.
Here.
Commissioner Hamilton.
Here.
Commissioner Herbert.
Here.
Commissioner Nichols.
Here.
And I don't see Commissioner Pickett.
He won't be here.
Okay. You have a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Coley. The minutes from the January board meeting were sent to us for review. If there are no corrections needed, we need a motion and a second to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Second.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. All right, the minutes are approved. Thank you. There's no official action today, but we have several updates from Gabe and his staff that they will share with us. So I recognize Gabe for his president's report.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate that. First update was me, Mark Walker, will give you an update. We are now through our mid-year of our fiscal year. So we have a mid-year update to show you where we're at on as far as organizational goals and financial goals. So Mark will give you some of those details as we have proceeded through the first half of the year. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you, Gabe. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Pleased to share with you today an update on our financial and organizational performance for the current fiscal year. And I think you'll find there's quite a bit of good news in the update today. So we're going to begin and touch upon some of the key organizational highlights, and many of those items that you see on the screen you're already familiar with to some extent. But we'll start with fiber. We're having a very good year with the expansion of our fiber service. To date, or at least through the end of January, we'd added about 6,600 new residential internet customers. And that puts us we're on a track to exceed our goal. We had a goal this year of 9,250 new residential internet customers. So through January, we're almost at 6,700. So we are on track to exceed that, and that's good. And we are projected to have by the end of the year 21,000 residential internet customers, which would also exceed our goal. And once we get to the financials, fiber sales margins up about $600,000 over budget. So good news there. You'll recall that one of our, I guess the single largest project in KUB's history is our new water filter project, which is being constructed adjacent to our water treatment plant on Riverside Drive. It's a $67 million project, and it is on schedule, and it is on budget, and which is good, and due to be completed this fall. So that is, it's been very well managed project. We have a very strong contractor helping to perform that work, and so that's also good news. You may recall that grant funding is a significant part of paying for that $67 million. We did receive $25 million in ARPA grant funding from the city and the county. We're awarded $25 million, and to date we've received $23.5 million of that. So that's a help to the water financial plan. Turning attention to employees for just a moment. As you know, KUB's workforce is very dedicated to community service, and this year through our Vol Time program, actually in 2024, we had a total of 4,700 hours of volunteer service on various projects across the community. And I think, again, that just speaks volumes about our employees, and that was an all-time record for that. So also on the employee front, on our teamwork program, this year marks our 30th year anniversary of the program that began back in 1995. And with this class, we're approaching near 600 students that will have gone through that program over that period of time. So we'll have an event later this fall to mark, I guess, officially the 30-year celebration, 30-year anniversary. And so that program continues to expand as far as partners and schools over time, and it's really taken off and is doing very well. So, and I also wanted to mention Hurricane Helene response. You'll recall back in, I guess, the late summer, the significant impact that Hurricane Helene had on our region, particularly Upper East Tennessee and into North Carolina. The flooding, as far as the impact to our system, I think we managed those impacts very well. It was a multi-utility impact for electric service. I think we had about 38,000 customers that were without power, a large number of single events, but all power was restored within 2.5 days. On the water side, we had challenges for our water plant operations because of all the debris that was coming down through the Tennessee River on that and the turbidity of the water. So we had to increase our use of chemicals to treat water and modify some of our treatment operations, but our plant operators and staff did an excellent job on that. So that was a big event for this region in particular on that. So those are some of the key organizational highlights for the year. I'll move on and we'll spend some time on financial. So begin with looking at it from an earnings perspective or net income, we're just under $66 million through December of 24. That's for all 5 divisions combined. That's an increase of $10 million in total over last year. And that's really driven by higher sales margins, which is arising at a level greater than operating expenses. So that's, that was to be expected. We've done a little bit better than expected on net income in total. I want to spend more time talking about budget performance, and we'll have several slides that follow that go into various components. But cash revenues, we are forecasting to be $28 million over budget for the year. 3 factors driving that. One is, and we'll talk about here in just a moment, TVA had the rate increase back in October of 24 of 5.5%. Now that was adopted by the TVA board subsequent to the board's adoption of our budget back in the spring. So that has driven up our energy cost above budget. We flow through that increase in energy prices to our customers. So that's about half of that revenue increase. Another component of that is last year we under-recovered our wholesale power cost and our wholesale gas costs from our customers for about $6 million. As you know, through our purchase power adjustment, purchase gas adjustment, rates are automatically adjusted this year to collect that under-recovery. So we are recovering that this year. That's about $6 million of that revenue increase. And really the rest, for the most part, is just increased sales growth, doing better than what we expected in sales volumes on that. So revenue's up $28 million. If you look at expenses, the board adopted a total $1.2 billion budget for the current fiscal year. Our current forecast is pretty much to hit that, only being about $2 million under budget. On a percentage basis, that's 0.2%. So it's pretty close for a budget the size of $1.2 billion. There's several variances there. We'll go into the detail, but real quickly, energy cost because of the TVA rate increase is really a negative variance. We are over budget on that. And then when you look at other components of the budget, O&M, capital, debt service, taxes and equivalents, all combined about $17 million under budget. So expenses, $2 million under. So when you look at revenues being up 28, expenses down 2, that's about a $30 million positive impact on cash. And we'll break that down by division here in just a moment. But because of that power cost increase, and being above budget, we are probably going to need to come back to the board and do this in May and request additional budget appropriations for the electric division to cover that increase in expense. Now, we'll have discussions with the Audit and Finance Committee in early May about that, and we've got several more months to go and see how everything plays out, but I don't see there's going to be enough cost to, in other areas to go down to offset that. And moving away from the budget, looking at or thinking back to last fall when we sold bonds for $111 million in new bonds, 91 million electric, 20 million water. We budgeted an interest rate for that of 4.5%, or a true interest cost. It came in at 4.05%, 45 basis points difference. You might say, well, that's not that big of a deal. But when you look at it over the life of the bonds, that's a positive cash impact to the plans, the electric and water plans in total of about almost $11 million. And so ultimately, even though it's spread over 30 years, that's $11 million that our customers don't have to pay, that we had previously planned for them to pay. So another good thing. And then for our retirement system plans, buoyed by strong equity performance in 2024 and somewhat supported by decent performance in fixed income investments, both our pension trust and our OPEB trust plans did very well, had double-digit returns, net returns. Pension was 11.5%, OPEB was 10.3%. So really, what does that mean? That helps to improve the funded status of the plans, and that should result in lower required contributions in future years as well. So again, another positive impact. So any questions? Those are some of the key financial highlights. The next 3 slides, we're going to go into more detail on the budget, so lots of numbers on these slides. And we'll begin with expenditures for the budget. So I'll point out, you'll see it by division, you'll see it by major cost component on there. If you see a red parenthetical, means it's forecast to be over budget. So if we begin with electric on the left-hand side, you can see the purchase energy for that $16 million essentially increase over budget. Most of that's the TVA rate increase. A small portion of that is higher than expected sales volume, so we're purchasing more from TVA because we're selling more to our customers than expected. And you can go down and see there's other variances there for electric, but ultimately it comes down to, at least right now, forecasting to be $9 million over. And if this stays the course over the next several months, that's the need to come back for additional appropriations for electric. If we look at the other divisions, you can see they're all forecast to be under their respective budget appropriations. Now let's go to the total column. We'll talk about some of our cost components. O&M in total $3.4 million under budget. That's primarily due to unfilled staffing positions being below our staffing plan. Now, if you look at each division, you can see that they're all under, with the exception of fiber, which is $610,000 over budget. And the reason for that is a budget allocation issue. There is a certain program or service that is all fiber, 100% for fiber, but when it was set up in the budget, it was allocated across all divisions. So that is creating a negative variance for the fiber. It's not that the service is over budget, it's just how it was allocated among the divisions, really a budgeting error on our part, but that's almost the whole reason that fiber, I know it sort of stands out there and is over in O&M. Capital in total is $1.1 million under budget, and I think that's significant because we have a total about a $300 million capital budget, and I know we still have several months to go, but I think the point is, some of you have been on the board longer than others. We've typically had in the past some very positive variances in our capital budgets, underspending. Things have really tightened up on that. So, I think, thanks to John Williams, John Gresham, Kurt Stafford, and others who've really, and our own financial staff, is doing a much better job of managing our capital budgets on that. So a relatively low variance for that. You will see for the loan to fiber, the board budgeted an $11 million loan from electric to fiber for FY25. And our current forecast is all that fiber needs, because of some improved for better performance and higher cash position than expected, only $7 million is going to be loaned to fiber this year. So you see a $4 million positive variance there. And then taxes and equivalents. We talked to the board back in December about this. The Knox County property equalization rate plummeted from 100% to 71% in 2024. We budgeted at 100%, so that had a significant impact on our amount of in lieu of tax payments to the city of Knoxville, Knox County being lower than budget. And you can see it's 6.8 million, but 6.5 million of that is in lieu of tax payments. So in total, you get it all down together, about 2 million under budget total. So any questions on that?
Are we going to, when you were talking about the 610, are we going to allocate differently moving forward? Was this just the first time and we weren't sure how it was going to work out?
I think ultimately it was an oversight on our part on how it was budgeted. So when it's budgeted next year, it will all be going to fiber. So we won't see that variance next year for that. Okay, so let's look a little closer at revenues, and really let's focus on sales revenues. Electric is up $22.2 million over budget. Again, a big part of that is, you know, the higher TVA rates impacting that and flowing through to our customers. And then we had the collection of the under-recovered costs from last year, and then you have some higher sales volumes in electric. Gas is up about 1.3 million, sort of the same story. Under recovery last year, collecting it this year on a wholesale gas cost. Water is flat. Wastewater is up about $2.5 million. And then fiber is under 161,000. So you might say, well, a few slides ago you said fiber sales margin is $600,000 over budget. When we're looking at margin for electric, gas, and fiber, we have to do the revenue in conjunction with this line item too. So you can see fiber is almost $800,000 under budget for cost of goods sold. That's really related to TV, phone, and that. So you have to combine it with that. You combine those two together, it's about $600 and something thousand over budget. So that's how you get to the sales margin. Other revenues in total about $1.9 million over budget, which is good. There's a lot of puts and takes in how that works, but in total revenues, there's your 28 million. Okay, the next slide, we put them both together to see what the impact is on cash position for each of the divisions. And here is good news. You can see for electric, it's $15 million. Gas is about 7.5, water's 2, wastewater 3.5, fiber about $2 million. So obviously more cash is better, and but this gives us some additional flexibility or some financial flexibility as we head into FY26, as we are presently updating our long-range plans, because we are finding some cost pressures, some increased cost in our divisions, just from continued inflation and such and other factors. So this flexibility will help us be able to offset that, absorb that, and hopefully we'll be able to stay true to our funding plans that we presented to the board last spring as part of the IRP. So, okay, next two slides, we're going to transition and talk about our metric performance. Last May, the Audit and Finance Committee adopted financial and organizational metrics for FY25. So now we'll look at our forecast for that. We'll begin with financial. We have metrics for O&M, cash generated from operations, and debt service coverage for each of the divisions, except we don't have debt service coverage for fiber because we have no long-term debt. And you can see from all the green check marks, we're on track to achieve all of our financial metrics, save one, and that's fiber O&M, but that goes back to what we just talked about. Why are you not meeting that one? That's because of that budget allocation issue on fiber. So pleased with that performance.
Is it also not meeting the target because we're investing more because people are, the demand is higher?
Not for O&M, we're not meeting the target essentially because we're that $600,000 over the O&M budget, and it's that budget. So basically, you could say, well, if you'd budgeted right in the first place and allocated it all to fiber, then that's probably a green check too.
Okay.
So, yeah. And then the organizational metrics. So we have organizational metrics, what's been set up for what approved by the committee last year. We have one for safety, electric reliability, Century 2 replacement levels for some key asset categories, call center performance, environmental stewardship, and fiber. And as you can see, there's a lot of green checks there too, so we are on track to achieve those. There are a couple that we aren't. I'll walk through them real quickly. Safety, the metric is 0 serious preventable incidents. And to date, none. And so we're on track to achieve that. Electric reliability, we have 2 metric components. That way you see multiple checks there. One is for duration. So the average number of hours out for the average electric customer. Frequency, the number of outage events. Through January, we were on track to achieve that as well. Century 2, we have 5 asset categories spread across 4 divisions that make up that replacement levels. 2, we are projected not to achieve. 1 is transmission line upgrades, overhead transmission line upgrades, replacements. And we're going to fall a couple of miles short of our goal for that. You might say, well, why is that? That really traces back to Hurricane Helena as well, because one thing that we also did during that was we released a lot of our contractor crews for extended period of time to go work in Upper East Tennessee and other areas of the region to help out on that. Those crews would do transmission line work for KUB, so we fell behind as a result of that. The other one which falls there, I know it's not marked, that particular one, another one we want to achieve is the level of mileage of water main replacement for the year. So when we set our target that the committee approved, we had several buckets. Part of it was we're going to have to relocate some water lines for road projects, okay? And so you'd be replacing, upgrading the water line when you do that. And what we found with road projects, often there are timing issues with those and they shift. So as a result, you know, the level of miles of main replacement shifts as well. So we'll fall a little bit short of our target on that because of timing of road projects. For call center performance, the metric was to answer 80% of our calls in 90 seconds. And we're at 89% through January on that. So we will achieve that. Environmental stewardship has multiple components. 2 are already achieved with community solar and having our generation flexibility under contract. So we've already achieved 2 of those, number of homes weatherized. We're well on track to achieve that goal for the year. And then finally with fiber service, I've already mentioned that. So go back to where we started, exceeding both our residential internet goals for the number of customers added during the year, and also we're ahead of pace for the miles of construction for the fiber system as well. And we'll achieve that component of the metric also. So that's all I have. I'll be happy to answer any more questions you might have, but I think when you sum it up, both from an organizational / operational performance and also from a financial performance, we're in a strong position. It's been a good year to date. So that's all I have.
All right, no questions. Okay. Next up, I asked John Gresham, our Senior Vice President and Chief Engineering and Operations Officer, to give you an update on some of the things we're doing in the electric division. As you know, as the grid modernizes or the technology gets better, we've been trying to reinvest in our systems, and we want to give you an update on where that's at, what we're looking at in the next few years. A lot of changes in this industry with just the technology we're starting to see. So, John, you got the floor.
Thank you, Gabe. Good afternoon, Commissioners, and Gabe, that was quite an understatement. So we're going to talk about a lot of really neat stuff here from an engineering perspective, but much like Mark, this is kind of a mid-year update on one of our strategic initiatives related to modernizing the electric grid. So just as a quick reminder, that's the 2 elements that make up this initiative. The first one's actually determining our strategy to modernize the grid, and then the second one is you've heard recently from Aaron Gill about deploying the flexibility capabilities from TVA. So I'm not going to talk about that element. I'm going to focus on the modernization of the grid today. So as Gabe said, the electric industry is evolving. It's changing actually quite rapidly for our industry, which has been pretty stagnant for many years. And what's driving that is what you see on the screen there, the decarbonization of the world. Everybody's going digital, processes are going digital, which increases resilience of the grid. Cybersecurity, obviously, when you make things technological, we've got to deal with that element. Weather's changing and our customers' needs are changing. They're much more dependent on electricity as we electrify. But underneath that, to make it maybe make a little more sense, it's the adoption of electric vehicles. It's the carbon-friendly generation resources like solar panels and wind. It's battery storage, which is becoming prevalent in the industry. It's data centers, which we talk about a little bit. They're really increasing with the blockchain mining, the cryptocurrency stuff that's going on, and now the emergence in artificial intelligence is driving consumption from those things to heights we've never seen before. And even KUB, we built our first community solar generation site, so we're now in the business. So all of those things are complicating what we see as the future of the grid, and that's what we're working on. So to make that a little more localized here, we know we're going to have to be a little more agile. We know we're going to build a little more operational flexibility to deal with what's going on here. So, you know, we are the utility provider. We're tasked with providing safe, reliable, affordable energy services to the community. But things are changing again. So think back to Winter Storm Elliott. First time in TVA's history, we had rotating outages required in our community and across the state. TVA has set 2 all-time system peaks in the past couple of years. One of those was just a few weeks ago, and there may be another one tomorrow. So the cold weather really driving that. That's new. So a lot going on in that space that we're having to factor in what we're doing that's on our doorstep today. And so not only safety, reliability, and affordability, but it's becoming flexibility, agility, and actually resiliency. Some of the things we're having to factor into how do we serve. So it's right upon us. So we saw this a couple of years ago. We do what we typically do. We engage a consultant that had some industry expertise to come in and work with us. And I guess I was a little naive about this. We posted this as a grid modernization roadmap exercise, thinking we were just going to develop, the 10 or 12 projects we had to do and do what we do best, go execute. Quickly, we recognized that we didn't know what we didn't know about this environment and this space. And it's very broad, it's very deep, it's quite complex, and it's continuing to evolve. So we don't think the industry's quite figured out what that end state's going to look like. But we're still able to make progress. So coming out of that initiative, we identified, and I know this is a lot on a slide, I apologize for that. So it's really about what's in blue and not everything else there. But we identified these 8 areas that we needed to probably start focusing on and prioritizing some effort to start mapping our future. So grid resiliency, obviously very important. There's going to be new technologies and automation applied to the grid. The electrification of the transportation stuff is a big deal for us, and it's really the catalyst that got us thinking about this as we saw more battery-run vehicles out there. Our customers' expectation and their expected experience is different. They're needing data. They want to know how they use their energy. They want to have the capability to do what they're doing. And then the last on the top there is what we call DER. That's Distributed Energy Resources. It's an acronym for that. That's the solar panels. That's the wind. That's the batteries. That's the things that can put energy on our system in places it's never been before. And so that's kind of the middle zone there, the things we're focusing on. The 4 lower boxes are capabilities we know we're going to have to develop to enable those 4 boxes above. So data and analytics, we're going to be very dependent on operating a real-time, complex electric grid. We're going to have data. We're going to have analytics. As Mr. Davis has said many times, coming through the fiber, we're a technological company. So we're pretty good at information technology, IT. But that technology is jumping the data center wall, and it's now out in the field with our assets. It's in the customers' homes. It's in our substations. So that operational technology is important to us, and we're gonna have to learn the same smart things we do with IT to OT. And there's a lot to figure out there. How do you secure your network in a substation, which isn't in a building that we necessarily control? So that's important to us. We also recognize that our community has carbon reduction goals, and we think we're an enabler. Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm. Operational technology.
And what's the difference between?
IT is typically in a data center in a controlled environment in one of our buildings, typically in a basement somewhere. OT is technology that's out in the field. So in our substations, in our pump stations, you know, our meters are OT out on a customer's home.
I was going to ask about, we've talked a lot about smart meters.
Yeah, it's going to be harder for us to control and secure potentially. So there's some elements there that the industry's looking at. Great question.
Thank you.
Yeah, I've used a lot of jargon in this presentation. I apologize for that. Yeah, I've really labored with it. But anyway, the community carbon goals, we think we're an enabler there, so we want to be a part of that. So striking partnerships and aligning with the folks there. And then lastly, and most importantly probably, is our organizational flexibility, which to us is making sure that our employees are aware of what's going on, the changes that are happening, and that they're trained and skilled to work in that environment to make this successful. So there's work going on in each one of those boxes currently at some level or other, but the three that are boxed out in red there are the three I want to talk about today because they're where we're focusing. So again, a lot of acronyms on the screen here. You don't need to worry yourself about that much, but technology is what's going to get us to this smarter automated grid that we're going to be managing. And we've been in the technological space for a long time, typically doing that for efficiency and effectiveness, you know, eliminating truck rolls or just making ourselves better. This new technology is going to be layered like a pyramid, like you see here. So we worked with the Tennessee Valley Authority and some other local power companies to develop, you know, what technologies are we going to need? And so we developed this pyramid of the technologies we'll be looking at. So the gray one at the bottom there, it's stuff we've done for years, very prevalent in the industry now. Most LPCs do it. But as you move up the complexity, that's the things we're working on. So anything boxed in red is a technology that we already have and utilize today. Anything boxed in blue is a technology that we're either deploying or we have in some state of pilot testing where we're trying to figure out what to do. And I think the takeaway here is the middle of the pyramid is covered by us. We feel pretty good about where we're at. We know analytics is going to be important, and we're dabbling in that space now. Got a lot of folks looking at that. We know forecasting, you know, these new generation units out there is going to be important. And the tip of the pyramid here, which is we've got some work that just got started, is this grid has to work as a whole from TVA to us. There has to be planning, there has to be operations, and that integrated planning piece is going to be a big deal, but very technologically reliant to allow us to get the agility that we need. So that being said, fiber deployment, as Mr. Davis over there just loves selling to our customers, I see it a different way. I love seeing our assets connected to that high-speed network. It is the true catalyst and enabler to us to this smarter grid of the future, right? And so you've heard about this initiative before. I felt compelled to give you an update on it. Typically, traditionally, we have called it the FLISR, the FLISR. That's a horrible acronym that we always have to explain. So we're going to move away from that. And what we're really building as part of our future smart grid is a self-healing grid. And it does that without human interaction. And we're going to do that by deploying those smart switches that we've got out there. So this project's following directly behind fiber and their deployment. We stole this graphic from fiber folks. You've seen that before for them. So this is our progress. So everything in green is currently deployed. Everything in blue is what we're doing this fiscal year. We've installed 83 switches out of 144 we committed to this year. So we've made good progress, and we're going to meet that goal, which has brought us to 239 out of the approximately 1,200 we'll put for full deployment. And we've got about 63,000 customers currently covered by this technology, and we're beginning to see the positive impact of that. So we had some adverse weather come through this weekend, some high winds. We had about 200-ish outage events that got created. This technology does not prevent outage events. It goes into play when things are out and recover. But we had about 200 outage events in that weekend, and it only impacted about 3,500 customers. And traditionally, that felt like it would have been more like 9,000 or 10,000 customers, and we can attribute that change to this automation here. So we're feeling good about where we're at. We're on track. The whole point of this system is to prevent customer minutes of interruption by shrinking those outage impacts down to the smallest unit we can. Typically 200 to 300 customers is what we designed to. And you can see we've saved 3.4 million minutes of interruption this fiscal year. To put that in perspective, on an average year, we usually experience about 20 million minutes of interruption a year. So making a dent, right? So good progress. And that's all because of the fiber, and this is focused on reliability. Moving to what we're working on now, which is grid resiliency and DR enablement, this is really about managing our peaks. So again, coming out of hurricane or a winter storm Elliott, we didn't like the concept of having the rotating outages, and we're trying to figure out ways to mitigate that. And that's all about the peaking during extreme temperatures. So it's very cold today, likely to see peaking. We're curtailing for TVA. We're working with TVA today. You've seen their public pleas for customers to be careful. So the things we're working on now are really about managing that peaking flexibility, that agility, that capability to not have to do that. But you see the graphics here. Here's where we live today. So TVA to us, to our customers, very linear. Looks simpler than it really is, but it's simple. Here's where we're going, and that does not look simple to me. The linear model's still there, but you can see electric, fleets. You see batteries connected to TVA, batteries connected to us, batteries in customers' garages eventually. You see EVs, you see solar panels connected anywhere here, and you see all these loops surrounded by data. That's where we're trying to get to. That's how the grid's going to function, and that's going to require a lot of coordination and technology to make that happen. So the four things we're doing in the space is we're looking at battery storage now. That makes a lot of sense. So during Winter Storm Elliott, what TVA did is they called the local power companies like us, and they said, we need you to cut 5% of your load now and for the next 4 hours. So for us, to make the math simple, let's say that was 1,000 megawatts is where we were. 5% of that's 50 megawatts. We need to find 50 megawatts of flexibility to overcome this, if that makes sense. So these batteries we're looking at, and none of these strategies are decided quite yet. We're working on that. We'll have that wrapped up by the end of the year. But we're looking at probably 20 megawatts of battery storage to be put on our system over the next 6 years. That will give us part of that flexibility. So those batteries charge at night when demand's low, and then it gives us the ability to dispatch that energy back to the grid when we need to. So if we had them today, we would have used them this morning because of the cold temperatures. Those batteries also offer some other benefits to us. We could do things like put them in front of our community solar if we so choose. So right now, community solar makes energy when the sun's out. That energy is put to the grid and it's used immediately. In the future, if you wanted to put batteries in front of those, the panels would charge the batteries. We could hold that storage and use it when we so choose, if that makes sense. We don't know if we'll do that, but there's lots of other opportunities here. And then as we talk about peak managing during these really cold times is what we're after, but there's a secondary benefit that we have peaking during the month, right? Every month there's a system peak set. We call that demand charges, demand cost, and KUB pays for that. We'll probably use those batteries every single month to do this to save our customers money. And we're working through that concept right now. So batteries are good. We're looking at that. Another way to do that's a concept called voltage optimization. This is being encouraged by TVA across the valley. And so our system works in a bandwidth of voltage. And we're regulated to keep it within that bandwidth. And we do that. We've got voltage regulation today that keeps us within the bandwidth as a whole. But the lower we can keep the voltage on our system, the less power is necessary to operate things on our system. And so we're putting sensors in our substations, sensors on our distribution system, and sensors at the end of the line to watch that voltage, control that voltage. We won't run that all of the time. We would run it during a peak. to make it work again. We've currently got a pilot project going on. That system was turned on today. It will be turned on tomorrow to help. We've got a couple feeders that we're piloting and watching, and we're pretty happy with it. So a full build out of that system is likely over the next 5 to 6 years. And this system has the capability to save us 1 to 3% of that 5%. Well, yeah, it'd be 20, 30 megawatts we could save through voltage optimization. And that's why TVA likes it. If they could get that completely deployed across the valley, it would be a good thing. The third topic we have here is a concept called microgrids. And that's a relatively new concept in the industry, but a microgrid's a localized, self-sustaining part of the grid. So think of it as having generation, either emergency generators or solar panels coupled with batteries, coupled with a control system that can effectively take that portion of load off of the grid, and it's self-sustained. And so it's valuable for essential services. So what we're doing is we're doing a feasibility study. We're about to wrap that up, and that feasibility study is focused on our Middlebrook Pike campus, a very important campus to us. Every single day it's an important campus to us. It's super important when bad things are happening in the community, like storms and whatnot. So we need that site with power at all times. So this feasibility study is going to show us the technology. It's going to teach us the configurations we could use. It's going to teach us how we should use it, and it's going to tell us how much that could cost. And the report's looking pretty favorable. It's important to investigate because our community is going to start asking for these things. So think today, warming centers or shelters would probably be a good thing to apply a microgrid to. The city-county building, an essential building for us all. They probably need services like that in the future. So we're exploring that technology. It also has a secondary benefit. If we had that capability today, we would have taken ourselves off the grid. That site for us is 1.5 megawatts, and we could have taken 1.5 megawatts off the grid. So it has secondary benefit as well. And then lastly, related to those distributed energy resources, we know that's the future. We know we've already built one of our own. We know our customers are wanting to build those, and we've got to make sure we're ready to allow those on our system and make them effective and efficient. They will eventually become part of TVA's generation portfolio, and TVA knows that, which means they've got to see them. They've got to be able to forecast how much energy they're making and so forth. So we're working on connection standards, so everybody across the valley is going to hook these up the same way. We're working on how do you forecast those units, and then ultimately you don't just plop these on a distribution system somewhere. There has to be engineering, and we have to make system improvements to make sure they can be there. So we've done those studies as well. So a lot of words there about modernization. Any questions related to the 4 high-level technologies?
A couple of questions. Timing, I mean, going back to the pyramid, I mean, we're looking at 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, when you look at some of these future architecture changes?
Yeah, sure, yeah, we're in motion now with the self-healing grid. Our SCADA system's being upgraded and will go live in March, so we're in motion. These 4 initiatives likely to begin next fiscal year. And we do have dollars funded through the long-range plan to fund everything that's on the sheet as we see it today. So we will begin in earnest next fiscal year.
And I noticed in your first slide, you had the boxes. We paid attention, I think 3 or 4 of them. One of them was workforce enablement, I believe, in the right corner. How do you envision, when this all happens in the next 5 years, whatever it may be, how does it impact? Will there be automation that will, less workforce or workforce reallocated to some other place? Are you looking to bring in new skill sets that you've never brought in before on some of the analysis and data?
Yeah, that's a great complex question.
I know.
So appreciate that. I think all of the above, and that's what we're trying to map out now. So the voltage optimization system we put on recently has required our system operators to learn new skills. And they're adjusting to that now. They're being trained to do that. We're writing the procedures to do it. So we'll skill up with who we've got. But we also know forecasting is something that's necessary, and that's probably a new role we're going to hire and place that skill set inside of the operations center, because someone has to look at what's going on in the network and decide whether we're going to deploy the batteries or not, or decide whether we're going to turn on optimization. So I think that's new skills we would probably recruit and bring in the house. And then the lesser more, I don't think we know yet. You know, you're looking at this stuff and you talk about artificial intelligence, and I'm sure that's going to get applied to what we do at some point in time, which hopefully would help, you know, maybe reduce costs in that manner. But I just don't think we know yet, just to be honest. So that's what we're working through. So, but great question. Yeah, great questions.
Is there an opportunity here to partner with your business community? You know, many of us have big old generators that we use if we have an issue, but a lot of this sounds much more interesting as sort of a backup as a business. Is that something you've contemplated?
There's a couple of things going on there, and that's a wonderful question because the resources are out in the community. KUB ourselves owns a lot of generation that we use as emergencies, right? So our plants this morning ran on diesel generators to get through the peak. We do that. There's a TVA program that allows that to happen. TVA is building a new program called Resiliency 360, which reaches out to business partners and helps with that. Hey, if you've got an emergency generator, let us hook up. We'll pay you to use it. So I think that's there. KUB owns a lot of other generators. I don't have everything on these sheets that we're talking about, but we own I don't know 10 megawatts of generators out there on our pump stations and whatnot. So it'd be nice to just be able to automatically turn those on. And so on and so forth. Yeah, so I think a lot of alignment with the community as we continue to advance. Microgrids would start that conversation because if you've already got a generator, you know, you're halfway there. So putting some batteries there in a control system, you're better off. So I think some of that'll be going as we continue to advance in this space. But great questions. And then real quick, the transportation space is changing. Again, we engaged a consultant to come in and help us understand kind of the parameters of the space. And for the sake of time, we started looking at adoption rates and the impact to our system. So, you know, in our community, the adoption rates of EVs are still down in the single digits. But there's going to come a day where they're not. But that study's told us we don't need to worry too much until it's about a 30% adoption rate. And then that's probably going to be that tipping point to change things on how we supply energy to vehicles. Fleet charging became a deal. We didn't really understand that initially, but if you think the CAT buses or school buses or some of these delivery services, they have a lot of vehicles at a single location that they want to charge overnight. And that's a large load. So treating that like a large commercial or maybe even an industrial load is important, which means we'll have to engineer our system to support that load, which means we need to be out in front of things to do that. So our approach here is to connect with folks that we know have fleets and make sure we're watching how they're growing and developing. Community charging, something of interest. I don't think the industry's quite figured it out yet. We've not settled in, although since we did this study to now, you see a lot more retail charging available out there. You know, what you see in the picture here, this is one of the 2 fast chargers that KUB put in recently. And even ourselves, this is our Ford Lightning. That's an all-electric pickup truck that we have. And so we have charging needs. So we're keeping an eye on what the community's doing. Again, we could be an enabler there. We could just be support there, or we could get out of the business if somebody else wants to do it. But keeping an eye on that's important. And then the concept of residential charging is something we're keeping an eye on. These are very large appliances, effectively, as large as your heating and cooling. That's a new appliance for a home, right? And if you're charging at home, there's likely to be in the future technology that's applied to that helps balance that, communicates with the grid, and helps us balance our resources. So we're keeping a close eye on that. We studied hosting on our system just so we could know that impact. And then a really unusual thing I did not anticipate is we don't know where these things are. And we need to know, not to know where the vehicle is, but to make sure our infrastructure can support the charging. So we're working with some really smart folks in the industry to see if we could use our existing meter data to identify where EVs are charging. And so we can get ahead of that and make sure our infrastructure is solid. So a lot going on in that space as well. So that was a lot of talking to get to this future state. You know, I think we're good with the strategies we're building now, but there's a lot more work to do. And so back to collaboration with the community, we are collaborating with the Tennessee Valley Authority on multiple levels. We're collaborating with our brother and sister local power companies and aligning our efforts there. We're collaborating with the industry in general. So the Electric Power Research Institute, ORNL, they've really helped us understand some of these technologies as they're cutting edge. And it's clear we see, as I said, what's coming next down the pipe for us is a couple of things. Integrated planning and operations, that's a big deal. TVA just spun up a team that I sit on where we're trying to figure out what that looks like in the future and map those procedures. And then we also did a study about the capabilities necessary in the future, and we've identified 20 capabilities that we think as a valley we need to do. We know where we're at on each one of those capabilities. We know where we want to be. We're studying that gap, and that's going to generate the work that we do moving forward. And there's also about, I think there's 12 to 18 pilot projects being facilitated by TVA where we're exploring the space, and we're active in each one of those. So a lot going on here. Just want to let y'all know this strategic initiative is moving well. It is a big, complex deal for us, but we see a lot of benefit and growth, and I think we've got a pretty good eye on the prize, even though the prize is moving around occasionally.
One question about batteries. When you're talking about EVs, there's a lot of conversation and a lot of research going on about battery technology for EVs. Mm-hmm. Is the same thing true of the batteries that we would be looking at using for storage?
Yeah, there's a couple of things going on in the battery world. Technology is evolving, and cost is coming down. So when we started this analysis, it was about $1 million a megawatt. As we're seeing our peers bid these things, it's $500,000 a megawatt. So that's a good thing. So we see it achievable and reasonable for us to do. The technologies, it's still out there. The way utilities use batteries is we can use a battery that's already used up from a car, potentially, because we just need longer term storage. It doesn't have to be the same battery. So I do think technologies will evolve. That's why we're kind of going at a slower pace. So the batteries we put in next year may not be the batteries we put in 5 years after that, as the industry still solves that. And the EPRIs and the RNLs are really working on that. They've got a process over there where they take batteries out of cars, they put them together as battery packs for hopefully utility use. So it may eventually become a great reuse program, but we are keeping an eye on the technology, and there's a lot of different versions out there. Lithium ions, where everybody's sitting now, the Tesla batteries are likely what we would deploy at this point in time, but who knows what that'll be in 2 or 3 years. Yeah, great. Yes, ma'am.
Sites can be placed where they do the crypto mining and all those things?
Ooh, that's a great question. I don't know if there's regulations per se. I know there's a lot of interaction with communities and with the utility providers, including TVA, that gauges.
So right now, I can put it wherever I want if I own the property.
And if it's zoned correctly.
Zoning.
Zoning's the key, yeah, you gotta have a good zoning.
Yeah, and you'd have to coordinate with us on the facilities,
zoning,
but yeah, if
okay.
you're just gonna use it for your own use behind the meter.
No, I'm talking about the mega.
The
big
grid
ones.
connected batteries.
The grid connected, yeah.
That would have to come through the local power providers, and TVA would have some say in that.
Right. Are we so early in that technology that we have not instituted any regulations?
That's a fair question. I don't know if they'll ever be regulated or not. So, like solar panels, I don't think solar panels are
They don't make the noise.
truly regulated yet.
I think the big noise ordinances that might be passed by the cities and counties, that'd be more than us. But we're not gonna put one in their neighborhood, I can tell you that right now.
Right.
I mean, we would not want to put one next to a bunch of people that live. It would not be a good thing for KUB if we did that, so.
Yeah,
I
and
know
there
it's
is a
big-
movement out there
big
that's.
Industrial parks, but we're hearing some rumblings about that.
Yeah, there are entities out there that don't like batteries in their communities. And that's typically driven by, there's a fire risk to the battery technology that's out there. We're aware of that. We're concerned about that as well, putting it in our substations. But That's pretty rare, but there is a movement to fight that, just like there's a movement to fight solar panels, and you can't make everybody happy anytime anymore. But regulatory wise, I've not heard a lot of movement where somebody's saying, hey, batteries have to look like this. Great question.
John, I've got a question. You know, we're seeing on a national basis an emphasis away from EVs. And I don't know how supported projects like that are going to be going forward. How are we monitoring that and putting ourselves in a position to leverage what we've done so far to being able to continue to support that if the community here locally wants it?
Yeah, I would say what we're doing is watching the industry. Yeah, we agree. We see the ebb and flow of this stuff, but you know, at the end of the day, electric vehicles are there. Again, community-wise, we're single-digit adoption, so we think we've got time before this might reach a tipping point. So I think we're keeping an eye on what's going on. We're still chasing grant dollars for facilities like that. Even our own fleet, we like an alternative fuel fleet, so electric cars are going to be a part of that, or electric trucks are going to be a part of that. So again, I think the stepping into it in a slow, methodical manner is going to help us keep an eye on and not overinvest or underinvest if that's what you're getting at. Mm-hmm. And, you know, if someday somebody says regulation-wise no more EVs, then we'll just end up having to unwind what we've done. But don't really see that happening at the end of the day. So I think that slow, methodical approach to all of these new technologies is a wise thing to do for us.
To echo what John's saying, you know, when Amazon built their new facility here in Knoxville, the electric truck, you know, all those trucks are electric that you see driving around your neighborhood, delivering your packages in the same day nowadays. Mm-hmm. And we see a load that we never thought we'd see. You know, that's them charging at night for the runs all day. And so the facility itself doesn't use a lot of electricity. As far as, you know, distribution, it's more about the trucks that they're hauling all the stuff in. So neat dynamic, neat technology, neat to see it evolve, but it'll be ultimately a customer choice. The incentives may go away federally, but people will choose it or not, and we'll have to be prepared for that, whichever way it goes. So,
yeah. And I didn't want to drop that name, but that literally could end up being a substation just to serve that charging load as they continue to grow. It's that kind of magnitude for the fleets that are back to sunk cost into infrastructure. That would be a big one. All right,
thank you, John. Last but not least is Veronica Maddox, one of our awesome customer counselors. I've asked her to give you an update on Project Help. As you know, every January they have a massive campaign in the Knoxville area with our partners. It's been going on for many, many years now, and that campaign just wrapped up, and I'd asked Veronica to give you an update on the campaign this year. Thank you, Veronica.
Thank you. Love to give this update for you, so I will share the Project Help 2025 campaign. Project Help, for those who are not familiar, they were established in 1983 by KUB and CAC because they saw the need to provide emergency assistance for those that are experiencing a crisis with their heating sources. The assistance covers all heating sources. It covers electricity, it covers natural gas, but it also pays for the purchase of propane, heating oil, wood, and coal. So, and that still stands for today. We still provide that service. The Project Help Board is governed by volunteer community members and partners that are dedicated to this cause. So as I go forward, my aim is to just share with you more details about the campaign, but also help you see the impact of the funds raised in the past. So our annual campaign with our local partners that are all listed below just wrapped up on February the 4th. It was a great campaign. We could not do it without them, and we thank them. It is a collaborative effort, and it takes all of us to get this done. But there are many ways that you can contribute that are up on the board. But this year, KUB's had a new online option that was launched this year, and we provided another way to receive donations for the campaign. As I said, in the past, we were not able to do this, but this year we were able to track that. And with our tracking and with our new measurements, we were able to show that we collected over $9,000. So along with Food City's donations and Home Federal donations, and along with ours, we actually exceeded last year's for over $10,000 or 20%. So this year's campaign was over $64,000. And to look at the impact of the funds raised, just over the last 5 years, we were able to assist over 1,900 families. And what that showed us that in this time of scarcity, you know, the need is there. It continues to grow. But there's people that recognize that need and still give back. So with that said, this really signifies, you know, the importance of that assistance to help people meet their basic needs. And then I just wanted to share with you, a lot of the people that we assist in very diverse communities share notes of gratitude with us, and this is just a few that we've collected in the last few months. We're looking at older women with families, disabled people, customers that are facing challenges, middle-aged people, women, single mothers, and just from all walks of life. So it just makes us feel good to be a part of such a growing need and assistance in this community. Any questions about the campaign or responses or about anything I've shared?
No questions.
Okay.
Thank you very much for the work you do.
Thank you.
Known about it for many years. Was part of an organization that worked with you to help people, and a couple of things that were very helpful for us. KUB doesn't cut people off on Friday. Y'all might not think that's a big deal, but that is a huge deal, and on holidays. So I thank you for this program. I thank you for the long-term commitment of KUB to help those who really need the help. And as you can see in one of your things, in 2020 and 21, that tells you that our community was in crisis.
It was.
And you met that need. So I want to thank you.
Yeah. Appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah. And you're right. That shows that need during the pandemic.
Exactly.
But what happened was other dollars stepped into the community, so it slowed it down, but the need was still there. So, and that may be something we're facing soon because money is leaving the community.
Well, thank you for all your hard work on that.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's, I want to say that Veronica lives in this every single day, and, you know, she's able to tap a bunch of resources. We've talked about that in the past, but, you know, we're one of many entities that work together to help folks. And so her daily work is literally taking phone calls and requests from customers to help them get their life back on track or to get them through a tough time. So thank you for what you do, Veronica. Last thing I want to update before we shut down, at least my part of the board meeting, is last month we had a customer come and talk to us about their reliability and lack thereof in Holston Hills. Since that time, we did have a community meeting. I'll ask Tiffany to give some more details on that, but we had a community meeting well attended by a lot of folks, a lot of good feedback, a lot of good discussions. We have made some upgrades to our system in the short term and more planned this summer. But it's been, the responses I've gotten from the customers, they appreciated the opportunity to vent or to talk in some cases, and we do have some plans in place. So Tiffany, you can take it from there.
Thank you, Gabe, and you did a great job already giving a good summary of how things went at the meeting, so wonderful. That just means you're aware, and that's great. So as Gabe mentioned, we did host a meeting. If you recall, when Ms. Wade came to the board meeting, we mentioned that we had a meeting scheduled, so we did have that meeting. It was very well attended. We had about 50 to 60 community members attend the meetings, and definitely were engaged, asked a lot of questions, and we had several people from KUB there from various departments so that we could answer those questions. But primarily we spent time really talking about why reliability was where it was within the community and what things we were doing to fix that in the immediate and then things that we would do in the future. And so what we shared with the community is that we did have some technology there in the community. Some of the smart switches that John talked about were actually the first generation of those smart switches. So Holston Hills was one of those areas where we started some of that work early on. And so we are going to be upgrading those smart switches so that we can isolate those outages and get them to much smaller groupings of customers, so they don't feel that impact as significantly. So shortly after that meeting, we did replace 2 of those older generation switches. And then through June, we'll be deploying fiber in the area, which is basically what we've been waiting on to provide additional improvements. And at that point, we will then be able to put in an additional 23 smart switches, which they will see the impact of that when it happens. So we talked a lot about that technology, what it would do for the community. We also committed to follow up with them about our progress. And so we since already done that. So obviously there are probably more than 50 or 60 people in the community. So we did do outreach via email for all those folks that we have email addresses for, and that did ask the somewhat of a homeowners association, please spread the word. And so we provided information to them on what we're doing, and we plan to continue to follow up with that community as we make progress. So in addition, we've met individually with some customers. So at the meeting, we did give the opportunity for people to come up and ask about their specific property. And so we have gone out and done some work, including with Ms. Wade. So just know we are working very closely with that community, and we're committed to helping resolve the issues that they're experiencing related to reliability.
Is vegetation management an issue out there?
It absolutely is. And we spent some time talking about that and talking about the work that we do there. And we actually have done some additional efforts. We really just did trimming there a year ago. So they're actually in a good place from a trimming standpoint. But we have committed to sending our vegetation crews out again to look at the circuit. Are there other things that we can do, as well as look at other equipment and devices out there? Are there other things that we need to change out? So our engineering team, customer support, the fiber team, our operations team, they're all heavily looking at what to do. And we do that in all communities, but knowing that the customers aren't experiencing our expectation with regard to reliability, we're really focused on trying to resolve that problem.
Yeah, just to follow up, Tiffany mentioned the trimming, which is absolutely necessary and important. But the challenge with that community, as well as a lot of wooded communities, are the trees outside that zone. So the zone that we don't maintain outside that area, very large trees, and so the issues they experience were actually largely caused by those trees outside the zone falling into those lines, which cause extensive damage. So we've been working with them trying to remove some of those as strategically as we can. There are tens of thousands of them, though. So if we remove 100, that's great progress. There's still others that may impact them. So the importance of the technology is really the best solution to where when those trees fall, we go out there and can replace the infrastructure that's damaged, but all the while a smaller group of people are impacted. That's the key, as opposed to hundreds, maybe it's tens that are impacted by the tree. So we're working hard on it.
I know from my experience in Riverbend, because our reliability has improved significantly. I moved out there in 1985, and we would have events where we would go without days without power, and that doesn't happen anymore. And I think getting the customers engaged in, watching those trees. I know probably Gabe thinks I'm crazy because I'll see a tree that's leaning and I'll say, I've spotted one, or my husband will say, hey, there's a tree that's leaning and it's probably outside the zone. But that's something that you can sort of empower the customers to get engaged with, because they can become a really helpful partner to us in watching that stuff before a crisis occurs.
Yeah, very good point. And you're right. We did try to spend some time asking them to help us, because you're right. They're there and we're not there every day. And so it is helpful for them to be an extension of our staff as we're trying to figure out what's causing some of the outages.
Tiffany, first of all, thank you and the entire team for such fast, high-touch action on this. Curious on the fiber making it there by June, and then the 23 switches that will improve. What's the timing on those 23 switches being implemented out in that area?
I think what we're targeting, and I'm not sure we gave them a date or not, maybe a season.
Yeah, we did.
But it's probably through the summer, so I'd say by early fall, more than likely that most of those devices will be placed. Just waiting on Davis over there and his team.
It usually comes right behind it, and this is a lot of urgency, and fiber has already been placed in that area, so we hope to even turn their fiber service on right ahead of that, hopefully early spring, maybe right into summer, so. But because of the size of the projects, they kind of move in lockstep with each other, so.
We're making sure the devices are on order. We're getting all the logistical things out of the way, and we'll be ready to deploy through summer.
All right, I'll echo everyone's thanks for the follow-up and the proactive nature of trying to address their issues. Are there any members of the public who wish to address the board today? Following the adjournment of this meeting, the board will have a lunch session that is open for the public to observe. This meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.